of the most frequent and sincere questions I get in the comments section is why hasn't anybody from Boeing been arrested and charged with crimes related to the MAX? Sadly, I don't have the answer. However, there is an abundance of material available that the United States government and Justice Department has made public on the internet that shows there is more than enough evidence to convict at least some Boeing employees for crimes related to the loss of 346 people. And one Boeing employee in particular, former Boeing chief technical pilot and recent Southwest Airlines captain, Mark Faulkner. It's been over 2 years now, and I for one am tired of waiting for some form of justice to be served. So that's the purpose of this video. I've spent hours poring over hundreds of pages, emails, text messages, and congressional reports so you don't have to. I have trimmed it down to just a small portion of the evidence Congress, the FBI, and the U.S. Justice Department have had in their possession for the last 2+ years. And in my opinion, there is more than enough evidence for a conviction of at least one man in particular. Will Boeing ever be served justice? That's next on Maximus. There's plenty of evidence that Boeing was well aware of the danger their new plane posed practically from the beginning of the MAX project. Since the spring of 2019, immediately after the second crash of an Ethiopian MAX 8 jet, multiple agencies of the U.S. government, including the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the U.S. Congress, conducted hundreds of interviews. Tens of thousands of documents, emails, and text messages have been compiled and made available to the public. Amid all those public documents, there is more than enough evidence to prove that at least 5 years before the first 2018 fatal Lion Air crash, many at Boeing, including engineers, pilots, and executives, were fully aware at some point that the MAX could and probably would be involved in a catastrophic crash or crashes. That's because Boeing had already experienced hundreds of catastrophic crashes in the MAX simulators long before the first plane ever left the factory. And while on the surface it appeared that Boeing was being proactive in their concern for the safety of future MAX passengers, that they happily cooperated with the U.S. government's investigation, that wasn't exactly the case. As a matter of fact, they didn't volunteer much information at all at the beginning. They were forced to, because a month before the second MAX 2019 crash in Ethiopia, and this is news you probably haven't seen on CNN, the Department of Justice had already quietly opened a criminal investigation into Boeing. But not just Boeing, more specifically focusing on one person in particular, Boeing MAX chief technical pilot, Mark Faulkner, and the role he played in covering up the MCAS system's chronic history of catastrophic failure, as well as lying to customers and federal regulators all over the world. Throughout, you will see that Boeing has redacted many of the names on these government documents, but there is one name that you will see rather prominently, that of Boeing chief technical pilot, Mark Faulkner. February 26, 2013. Even though the names are redacted, we know the author of this email was Mark Faulkner. He says if synthetic airspeed is standard on the MAX, it would jeopardize the program because they couldn't maintain Level B training. Level B training is computer-only training, not physical simulator training. Why is that important? Because from the beginning, Boeing knew if this plane that they were marketing as just an ordinary 737 with brand new engines included any additional systems that would require simulator training or change the classification of the aircraft, it would be considered a brand new aircraft type, and that would require all sorts of FAA red tape. But most importantly, it would cost Boeing money and time, especially at the cost of creating brand new Boeing MAX simulators. Airbus's new A320neo required zero new training on computers or simulators. A320 pilots could just slide over and start flying. It was a huge selling point for Airbus. Problem is, Boeing couldn't make that same promise. Well, not honestly. So in an effort not to lose 737 customers to the sexy new neo, Boeing did make the same promise to prospective airlines. Only one problem. it wasn't true. Because the one high-dollar item that would have cost Boeing the most money and time lost to Airbus's Neo launch would have been the creation of all new MAX simulators. But as you will soon see, Mark Faulkner's #1 job assigned to him by Boeing was to keep costs to a bare minimum and spend as little time on training as possible. Boeing was already behind schedule to Airbus's A320neo, so delays of any kind were never tolerated on the project. As we all know now, sitting here in 2021, the sad result of this decision was synthetic airspeed would have prevented both MAX air crashes. December 10th, 2014. In these interdepartmental chat messages, you can see the plan to avoid getting the MAX classified as a brand new aircraft was to tell their customers, the FAA and world regulators, that there was no difference between the Boeing 737 NG series and the new 737 MAX. Why? Because if Boeing admitted that it was a new aircraft type, that meant Boeing needed to foot all the new simulator training red tape and bloated costs, and most importantly, that loss of time to Airbus, which, like I said, Boeing didn't have. At the first highlighted line, we see a reference to the NG MAX training differences, but it's the next line that stands out. They say it's going to be an ugly set of CBTs. That's computer-based training. However, they continue. If it meets minimum standards, that's fine. Again, Boeing needed to keep the MAX budget as small as possible. They needed to keep it to iPad and laptop training, even though they already knew the MCAS system was suffering catastrophic losses in the actual simulator. Still, Boeing's main concern was to save as much money and time as possible to catch up to Airbus. The next line speaks for itself. Like the text says, the whole project, it was a turd in the punch bowl. October 5th, 2015. This single email allows me to sum up Chief Technical Pilot Mark Faulkner's entire life in one phrase. Remember this phrase because you're going to see it over and over again in his texts and emails. This guy lives his life like a college kid who only cares about himself and his juvenile love of sci-fi movies, along with his little clique of frat buddies that he keeps around to continuously stroke his ego. Here Faulkner says he's going to Jedi mind trick these people into buying some airplanes. These people are Boeing customer airlines, and Jedi mind tricking is a juvenile reference to the movie Star Wars. So what he is gleefully admitting here is that he's gonna lie and knowingly sell defective, potentially dangerous airplanes and seemingly couldn't care less about the consequences. Keep in mind, Faulkner isn't some rogue independent contractor. His marching orders come directly from Boeing management, which is evidence of a much bigger, shall we say, conspiracy, for lack of a better word. June 12, 2015. Again we see reference to NG to MAX training. Here they are gleefully talking about lying to regulators. In the underlined sentence, he says, "I know it sounds hokey, but that's the game we have to play with these regulators." In the reply, his colleague rightly questions it's a scam. He even repeats that line to make sure he read it correctly. March 30, 2016. In an email to the FAA. If there ever was a smoking gun email, this is it. Faulkner tells the FAA that the MCAS system was so automatic that neither Boeing or the FAA needed to even inform pilots, especially in print, that the Flight Crew Operations Manual even existed, because the odds were that it would never even be used during actual flight, even though Faulkner himself was crashing MAXes on a daily basis in the simulator as a result of the same problem that later brought down both the Lion Air and Ethiopian Air MAX jets. Look closer at that first sentence. I confirmed with the flight control engineers that MCAS does live in both FCCs and only needs one to function. One meaning the now infamous angle of attack sensor. In the final Senate committee report, they put it this way. Boeing engaged in multiple efforts to downplay the role and potential safety implications of MCAS on the MAX, and attempted to abolish any reference to MCAS from various Boeing documents. In March of 2016, Boeing sought and received approval from the FAA to remove references to MCAS from the airplane's flight crew operations manual and training materials. Boeing also failed to share critical information with the FAA or MAX customers regarding the fact that the company knew that it had taken one of Boeing's own test pilots more than 10 seconds to respond to uncommanded MCAS activation in flight simulator tests, and the pilot found the condition to be catastrophic. However, it was more important for Faulkner to be Jedi mind-tricking the FAA instead of saving future lives. So what happened? The FAA allowed future reference to the MCAS system to be completely removed from the flight crew training manual. Boeing instant chat messages from July 2016 reveal Faulkner complaining that now one of his co-workers, another test pilot, insists that she needs to feel the characteristics of the plane in a simulator, not just on a computer tablet. Then scroll down to the last highlighted section where the other pilot says she, and we don't know who she is because it's redacted. But he continued, she knows damn well that she will be crucified if it was her who forced the entire program to require sims. There were a few people who tried to do the right thing, but ultimately the pressure coming from the top brass at Boeing quashed any internal rebellion. November 3, 2016. Faulkner again brags that he roamed the world blatantly lying to regulators. Furthermore, this trip was led by the FAA and the AEG. The AEG, now known as AFS 100, is the FAA's aircraft evaluation group responsible for certification of new aircraft. Faulkner says he got what he needed, but you know me, I usually get what I want. And there it is again. He's Jedi mind tricking all over the world. November 15, 2016. This is the one text message that all the news outlets ran with in 2019. Faulkner's lawyer says these texts prove his client wasn't actively lying to people, he was just a poor, unwitting participant. Faulkner: oh, shocker alert. MCAS is now active down to Mach 0.2. It's running rampant in the sim on me, at least that's what Vince thinks is happening. Gustafson: oh great, that means we have to update the speed trim description in Volume 2. Faulkner: so I basically lied to the regulators, parentheses, unknowingly. Gustafson: it wasn't a lie. No one told us that was the case. Faulkner: I'm leveling off at like 4,000 feet, 230 knots, and the plane is trimming itself like crazy. I'm like, what? Gustafson: that's what I saw on Sim 1, but on approach. I think that's wrong. In the text message, Faulkner is telling fellow test pilot Patrick Gustafson that MCAS is now activating at slow speeds, which it never was intended to do. But then he says, so basically I lied to the regulators. But notice how he took the time to add the parenthetical unknowingly. I've always wondered why he needed to add the unknowingly in parentheses, unless he was covering his tracks. From what you've seen so far, does it look like Faulkner has been an unwitting participant to you? Let me know down below. January 17, 2017. Faulkner again is lying, and he's massaging his relationship with the FAA. It's important to note that this email is 3 months after the text conversation where Faulkner said he didn't willfully lie to the FAA. Faulkner again is telling the FAA to delete the very information that would have saved lives from the Flight Crew Operations Manual. February 20, 2017. Here a test pilot is talking about how his bosses removed him from the MAX flight simulator for 3 days because he would not approve of the cover-up the other pilots participated in. You can see here the test pilot said even though the entire engineering team had the obligation to vote go or no go on the program, Boeing was clearly feeding test pilots false information in order to get their go vote. March 28, 2017. This email alone should get Mark Faulkner and Boeing executives sent to prison. Faulkner says there will not be any type of simulator training required to transition from NG to MAX. Then he clearly threatens Boeing will not allow that to happen. A year and a half later, 346 innocent people lost their lives. April 26, 2017. Here is the now infamous text message that the press ran with in 2019. Out of all the emails and text messages, this one may be the most honest and truthful of them all. The MAX was designed by clowns who in turn are supervised by monkeys. Then just below that, someone else chimes in and says, Jesus, it's doomed. A year and a half later, 346 people were doomed. June 5th, 2017. Faulkner is exasperated because an airline is getting nervous that their new plane may be too much for their pilots to handle without simulator training. He says, I'm putting out fires with blank. The redacted name here is none other than Lion Air. He says, I'm putting out fires with Lion Air who suddenly think they need simulator training to fly the MAX. Notice the exclamation point, followed by the very mature cartoon ARG dragged across the page. A little over a year later, 189 people perished on Lion Air. June 6, 2017. Faulkner chastises another worried airline in a very condescending email. This time he speaks for Boeing and says Boeing sees absolutely no reason for pilots to train in a MAX simulator. Then he adds the most egregious lie of all of his emails and texts. He tells the airline the only difference between the NG and the MAX is the landing gear cutoff switch. And then the coup de grace. Faulkner tells them that Boeing already got the FAA and other regulators from all over the world that he and Boeing had lied to simply pass the MAX off as just another 737 variant. So of course concerned airlines would acquiesce and agree. If the aviation governing bodies from around the world signed off on it, they would too. As you see time and time again, airlines were begging Boeing to help them figure out this nightmare of a plane. And time again, Boeing refused. June 6, 2017. Once again, this time using guilt as a tactic, Faulkner tells Lion Air if they require simulator training, it would cause a difficult and unnecessary training burden on his and other airlines in the region. June 7, 2017. Oh, look how happy Faulkner is with himself in this email. The airline he was beating up the day before capitulates to Faulkner's deceit, and then his favorite phrase reappears. Faulkner says he pulled Jedi mind tricks on the airline and they agreed to computer-based training only. Yet Mr. Faulkner remains a free man and a commercial pilot. December 12, 2017. Again, we know this is Faulkner texting. How do we know that? Well, his childish Jedi mind tricking is back. This time he refers to the DGCA, the aviation regulator for South Asia, which includes Lion Air. Faulkner considers them fools. You can see here that Faulkner got them to accept computer-based training only. Then he brags about making them look stupid for simply asking for life-saving training. But for Faulkner, it's all fun and Jedi mind games. Within the next year, 346 innocent people will be gone. February 9th, 2018. Yet again, the man-child Faulkner talks about Jedi mind tricks. This time he tricked 280. What's 280? It's believed that 280 is the code for EASA. Outside of the FAA, EASA, or the European Aviation Safety Agency, is the largest regulator in the world. Like I said, I sifted through hours of emails, texts, and other documents, and only for the sake of time, I'm showing you only a fraction of all the evidence against Boeing and Mark Faulkner in particular. You could fill hours of time with the amount of evidence the Department of Justice has in their possession. In October of 2019, Boeing executives were hauled before the United States Congress along with the family members of all the victims of both crashes. Boeing was asked to explain how such an indefensible tragedy could have occurred. One person, however, was conspicuously absent. That's right, the Jedi chief test pilot Mark Faulkner. Faulkner, now a captain for Southwest Airlines, lawyered up. Whereas Boeing was finally cooperating with the Department of Justice, Faulkner hadn't said a word. Apparently, after all his bragging about Jedi mind tricking all over the world, suddenly the frat boy had nothing to say. I guess Jedi mind tricks don't work under oath. Then there's this email from an unidentified engineer lamenting about how unbearable the culture at Boeing had become. Look at the underlined sentence at the bottom. Sometimes you have to let things fail big so that everyone can identify the problem. I found that a fitting metaphor for the Boeing MAX program, because Boeing did indeed fail big, and everyone found out. Oh, and one last exchange that jumped out at me. This chilling exchange between two unidentified Boeing engineers may well sum up the entire MAX nightmare. The conversation starts at 11:27 a.m. He or she says, "Yes, I still haven't been forgiven by God for the covering up I did last year. I can't do it one more time. The pearly gates will be closed. I just received a shovel to start my journey to a hotter place. I'll end up there either way. There is no way anyone involved in this project does not end up there." The implication of there being in hell. So there you go. I know it was a lot to sit through, and I hope I kept it interesting enough that most of you stuck around until the end. Sadly though, if you ask me what I think will actually happen to Boeing or Faulkner, if ever, not much. Sure, there will be a huge fine and that will be that. Will they prosecute Faulkner? Maybe. Will they turn him and use him as a witness against Boeing? It's possible, but unlikely. I think you all know where I stand. I think people need to go to prison for this, but that's my opinion. What's yours? I want to know what you think. Was Faulkner just doing what he was told, or was he deeper involved than that? Let me know down below. And as always, remember to subscribe, like, share, and ring the bell. And remember, leave the rubber on the runway and your troubles on the ground. And I will see you next time in the air. Yeah, this is Maximus.